Um, all right, we're ready to go when you are, Elena.
All right, awesome. Thank you, everyone, for coming today to our small talk about the rise of young independents and open primaries. This is a presentation done in conjunction with Civic Season, which is striving to sort of reshape how we celebrate our country during this part of the year. We're very excited and honored to be a part of this, and we're excited to share our knowledge about open primaries and being independent voters. Okay, so a little bit about who we are. My name is Elena. I currently am based in the Broward County area of Florida, and I'm 17 years old, and I'm a rising high school senior.
And my name is Dario. I'm 17, not from Broward County, from Orlando, Florida, and I'm a high schooler, just like Elena.
Yeah, we've been working on open primaries and opening up primaries all around the country for about a year, a little bit over a year, actually. We started in Florida, and now we're working on opening primaries everywhere else. Okay, so hopefully everyone knows what open primaries are, but a quick refresher. Open primaries are primary elections that are open to every single registered voter, regardless of party affiliation. And there are a bunch of different types of open primaries. For instance, semi-open primaries, top two, top four. We at Students for Open Primaries believe that every form of open primary is a step towards more inclusive and representative democracy. But a little bit of background on different kinds of open primaries. Semi-open primaries, they allow independent voters to pick a ballot without changing their party affiliation. Top two open primaries, it's basically one large primary where all the candidates run together, regardless of party, and then the top two vote getters from that primary then move on to the general election. Top four is very similar, but instead of top two vote getters, is the top four vote getters. And those are just some of the different kinds of open primaries we have. Uh, on the flip side, a closed primary is one that only members of a party can vote in the primary, and that means that independent voters are often shut out of primaries. So are third party voters, because they can only vote in their third party primary instead of being able to vote on Democratic or Republican candidates, which basically shuts them out of voting at all in the primary. Oh, all right, Dario.
We care about primaries because the current system that we have, um, there's one very far right leaning side, which is the Republican Party, and there's one very far leaning side of the Democratic Party. And in today's current political climates, a lot of young people are more and more becoming independents because they feel like they cannot be represented by either of the parties. Voters should have more power in the political system than the parties, but because of a closed primary system, we have a duopoly in the country, not allowing any other third party thought or independent thought.
So, like you said, a lot of young people are becoming independent. In fact, the entire American electorate is made up of 42% of independents. Um, that's literally almost half of the entire electorate, and it's actually been growing, especially among younger generations. Over half of millennials and Gen Zers have not identified themselves as members of the Democratic or Republican parties. And that means that over half of our generation as Gen Zers is being shut out of primary elections, which is not good for a million reasons, but one of the biggest ones is on the next slide. Oh, whoops. I think it's on a different slide. Hold on. Um, oh, I think I accidentally stopped sharing. Hold on.
Technical difficulties.
I know. We're supposed to be good at this too. Okay. Now, hopefully you can see that. um, so basically one of the biggest reasons why it's a bad thing that so much of our generation's shut out of primaries is that general elections are not competitive. A lot of general elections are decided in the primary. A good recent example of that is the New York City mayoral primary that actually just happened this week. If you all been following the news, basically the citizens of New York, the Democratic citizens of New York, have been voting on who they want to see as the Democratic nominee for the New York City mayor. Um, this is an issue because independents, Republicans, and third party voters have no say in who becomes the mayor of New York City, since it is such a largely Democratic city. They were shut out of these primaries because New York is a closed primary state. For a little bit of reference, there are over 1 million voters in New York City that are independent who have not, they were not able to cast their votes this week um, because it's a closed primary system, so they have no say in who becomes mayor. And also, another thing I wanted to point out is so many non-Democrats were actually encouraged to switch their party affiliation simply to cast a vote, just to have a say in who becomes mayor. So basically, they're being asked to um, like give up their values and their morals and their political beliefs to change a party to vote in a primary because the general election is so uncompetitive in New York City for most things, but especially the mayoral race. So, how did we get started? Daryl, you take this one.
We got started actually about a year ago, as of a few days ago, where Civics Unplugged, an organization Elena and I are both a part of, connected us to Open Primaries, a partner organization for a summer internship in Florida in 2020. Um, they wanted to see if we were able to lead a virtual student campaign for Amendment 3, which was an open primaries amendment in Florida. Um, we had zero experience in political campaigning. We both admit that. Other than like school politics, but we learned very quickly school politics is different from regular politics. But we were still willing to give it a shot. And that picture there is from our first day on Zoom.
So basically what we did in Florida was we worked as a small student campaign to support Amendment 3, which was the proposal of the implementation of a top two open primary system for the election of state officials like state legislators, the governor, elected cabinet members, etc. This would basically create a top two open primary system where every voter could vote in one large primary for any candidate they pleased, regardless of their party affiliation or lack thereof.
Um, our campaign was intended to be a virtual campaign targeted at students and young voters. So, really, that college student demographic, people under the age of 21 or 22. Um, we worked with other Amendment 3 campaigns like Florida Open Primaries. I know Steve is on this call. And um, the point where we jumped into the actual thing, the amendment was already on the ballot thanks to the efforts of another coalition campaign, All Voters Vote. The campaign was very virtually focused. It was at the height of the pandemic. What we also knew, it was virtual only because students and young people in general are living online basically. Um, and having an in-person campaign would be less efficient than hosting a virtual campaign where everyone was already at.
So we faced a lot of challenges going into this. The main challenge was the blowback that we got from the two major parties. The two major parties tend to hate open primaries because it chips away at the power that they have over our political system. So we faced a lot of blowback from the Democratic and Republican parties, especially starting in August throughout the rest of the summer into November when the election was held. So on November 3rd, we actually failed to reach the supermajority of 60% that we needed to pass by only 3%. We literally, as you can see on that picture, we got 57.03%. Um, Despite the majority of Floridians actually approving this amendment. A fun little tidbit I always like to say when talking about this was um, the Amendment 3 actually garnered more support than either Biden or Trump did in that election in our state. I think it says here, I have to move my little thing. Biden won 47.9% of voters and Trump won 51.2, whereas we got 57.03. So it's kind of crazy how it basically beat out the two presidential candidates, but yet didn't even pass. But we know that this failure is just a foundation for future campaigns to get open primaries passed in Florida. And we're definitely not disheartened by this, where it's just making us even more excited and ready for the next election cycle so we can try to get this passed. So, what happens next?
Our virtual campaign in Florida actually morphed into something bigger, a national student open primaries. We're working with the Education Fund of Open Primaries to spread and educate others in our generation and also in our local communities with our volunteer base about open primaries, because one of the primary reasons Amendment 3 did not reach that 60% threshold is because people were more open to misinformation by the two major parties because they didn't know what open primaries was or is in the first place. Because admittedly, open primaries is not a very popular issue despite it being very important.
So, what do we do at Students for Open Primaries USA? Well, basically, we're building a community of students to advocate for open primaries and nonpartisan electoral reform.
As I mentioned earlier, we have our volunteer base where there's no time commitment for those volunteers. We provide volunteers educational resources like presentations and opportunities to help through our online community so that they can educate their peers and their community about open primaries. For example, we have a lot of volunteers from some closed primary states. Um, I can't name some states off the top of my head, but I think Elena can.
Yeah, we have volunteers from Oregon, we have volunteers from Florida, our state, and we also have volunteers from open primary states or semi-open primary states because we realize we're going to need a lot more than just people in closed primary states in order to make sure every single primary is opened. Okay, next slide. So we also have, as a part of our organizational structure, we have student ambassadors who are a part of our leader corps. They basically are leaders who want to take on organizing young people to open up primaries in their state. So our student ambassadors are currently from closed primary states, and we give them access to support and resources. For instance, we connect them with existing campaigns that might already be in full force in that state, as well as other opportunities and resources like op-ed placement, like text, phone, email banking resources, things like that to support the campaign. Because as we know what it takes to run a student virtual led campaign, and we want to make sure that future student led campaigns are able to have those resources easily at hand. Um, I'm sure that would have definitely, looking back on it, been really helpful for us if someone had said, like, hey, we know what you're doing. Here's how we can support you in the way that we strive to do at Students for Open Primaries.
And with that, there are plenty of areas you can find us on social media and online. First off, we have a website, studentsopenprimaries.org, and on social media, we're at Students for Open Primaries on Instagram and Facebook. And just recently, we also got on TikTok at Students for OP. I promise I won't do any cringy TikTok dances on there. Um, we also have a website where people who can donate to the Open Primaries Education Fund's campaign to raise funds for students for open primaries. That is tinyurl/SFLP donate. And then if you point your phone camera, I believe it's iPhone or in some new Android devices, you can point your camera at the the code on the screen, and you can reach our website. And also a recording of this meeting will be available after on the Civic Season website and our own website.
So that about wraps up what we had prepared. If anyone has any questions or comments, you can unmute yourself or pop them in the chat, and we'd be more than happy to answer. Thank you, Russell.
You didn't even say thank you, Steve. Thank you,
Well,
Steve.
thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
If no one has any questions for us, I think that about wraps up our presentation. Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to us talk about open primaries and the importance of making sure that independent young people, especially, are represented in our election system. So thank you all for coming. I hope you have a lovely evening. Daryl, is there anything else you want to say?
No, just thank you, just like you said. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, happy civic season, everyone.